Alright, so let's talk about this CAD to laser fabrication assignment and some of the intricacies involved in doing this. So we need to start with a brand new AutoCAD drawing file. So we'll click on the Start button and get a new drawing started. And then you're going to create at least 3 layers. And I want you to pay attention to a couple of things. You're going to create a layer called Cutting. It's got to be red, and it's got to be 0 line weight. And Scoring has got to be blue and 0 line weight. Engraving is going to stay white, and we're going to make this a heavy layer. And actually, we're going to go a little bit off book here. So I've got my CAD file opened up. And let's take a look at my layer properties. Alright, so I do have a layer called Cutting, and it is red. And it's got to be this red, number 1. And in addition to being red, it is a 0 line weight. This will be for things that we want to cut out. We have a layer for Engraving, and I've called it Engraving Default. I should probably spell that right though, huh? There we go. Engraving Default, and that is a white color with a default line weight. I've also added another engraving layer. It's engraving 0.4 millimeters, and then surprise, surprise, the line weight's going to be 0.4 millimeters. Color's still white. So Cutting is red, Engraving is white, which will engrave as black. And then we have a layer called Scoring. Scoring is blue, and Scoring has to be 0, and of course the blue can't be any blue, it's got to be blue number 5. Alright, now there are a couple of more layers I've added to this drawing, and I suggest you do the same. I've got a layer called Raster, and it's green, and line type and line weight are really not that important. They can stay what they're set to by default. I also added another layer called Trace, and this is going to make your life much easier if you can follow my naming convention here. So Trace is magenta, and it's a heavy, bold line, 0.5 millimeters. Alright, so I would suggest setting up the layers like I have them here, and this will make our job much easier when we're trying to convert raster images into vector images. Now, the truth of the matter is there's no magic button in AutoCAD. You think there would be, but there's not. So for us, this is going to be a manual process. And honestly, you might have already done this on some other assignments. For example, I know in this Unit 13, when we talk about text, some of the instructors, when it's time for you to make your poster, they want you to trace over this map. So they give you a picture, a raster image, and they say trace that over. This way your map is beautiful like this map. And if your instructor did that, then you already have a little bit of experience working with a raster image and CAD lines. Not all the instructors do that though. Sometimes you get told just draw a vicinity map, and it doesn't have to be to scale or anything perfect. It's just a rough, close enough for hand grenades sort of map. So you might or might not have experience with working with raster images up to this point. But if this is your first time, that's okay. The idea is we need to get a raster image. And it can be any raster image that you want. I'm thinking something along the lines of an easy to trace logo, and it could be for anything. It could be for product, it could be for a band, it could be your favorite football team, it could be your favorite soccer club, it could be the Nike Swish logo, it could be the Wu-Tang Clan, anything musical related, anything you want really. So just for kicks, if you want to play along at home and do this with me, I'm going to try to find the Superman logo. And I need a raster image, and I'm sure Google is full of them, and sure enough, here they are, right? So I'm going to take that Superman logo and I'll right click on it, and I'm going to save it because I want to save the picture. And I'm going to actually save it to my OneDrive, and I'm going to stick it in that other folder. And this is saying it's an SVG. And you know what? I can't really work with an SGV. So let's see if we can find something that's not an SGV. Save image as. And this is a PNG. See, a PNG, a JPG, a BMP. These are all image files that AutoCAD can easily work with. So let's do this. Let's work with this guy. We're going to call this Superman logo. And we'll hit save, and it's saving it in the OneDrive in our B12 folder, in the other folder, Superman logo. Okay, and I see it down here. Okay, so now I can work on using that image within AutoCAD. So if you go to the next tab on the ribbon from the Home tab, the Insert tab, there is a tool called Attach, and you can click it, or you can just type Attach on the command line. And Attach is actually looking for an image file. So it's looking for an image file. I want you to direct it to an image file. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to direct it to my image file. And there's Superman logo. And I'll hit Open. Now, everything you see here, we really don't have to do a lot to set this up. If we have an option to change it from a full path to a relative path, that'd be great. It's saying it can't, so we'll just keep it on full path. And then insertion point will tell AutoCAD where to put it. Scale will tell AutoCAD where to put it. I think that's reasonable. You know, we can just say, no, let AutoCAD do it. If I uncheck it, AutoCAD will place it automatically where it wants and automatically the right size, so maybe that's a better option. We'll hit OK, and then there it is. Here's our image. It landed at 0, 0 because we didn't say we were going to place it, and it's good to go. Now, when you click on it, you'll see you get a new tab up here to work with this image. And honestly, we're not going to mess around with the image too much, but you can take it and you can put it on the raster layer. Okay, so now it's got that green border around it. It's on the raster layer, and that'll be helpful because later on, after you've converted this into vector graphics, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to turn the image off. Okay, so step one is to get your graphic, and whatever graphic you want is good with me, right? So I've got my graphic, and now I need to figure out how to trace this thing. And honestly, tracing in AutoCAD can be a real pain in the neck. So I'm going to try to show you a couple of things that might make this easier. Okay, and the pain in the neck comes from, look at the color of the cursor. Look at the size of the cursor, right? The pain in the neck comes from the fact that it disappears on white. You can hardly see it. And then when you're tracing, if you trace with white lines on white, same problem. They're hard to see, right? And we don't want to make this harder than it has to be. So I've done this a couple million times, and I've figured out ways of doing it to make it easy. So maybe we can make it easy. I'm going to click on the big red A in the application menu. I'm going to go to the options. First thing I want to do is I want to change my cursor so I can see it. Okay. So right now it's very small. It's at a 5% of the screen size. I'm going to make it 100% of the screen size. And what that does, it just lets you find the cursor easier on the screen because it's not a little plus sign anymore. Now it's a giant crosshair. And I'll go back to options. I'm also going to change the color of the cursor. So I'll click on Colors. And of course, that's on the Display tab, Colors. I'm going to pick Crosshair. And white doesn't look very good on a white background, so I'm going to pick out something that stands out, maybe like green. Alright, now I've got this bright green, lime green cursor floating around, and it's much easier to see where my crosshair is. Of course, if green doesn't work for you, you can use any color you want. You can make it magenta, you can make it red, you can do whatever. Oh, let's not change that. Crosshairs. Change the crosshair from green to red, not the background. Can't even imagine looking at a red background all day. Okay, so now my cursor is really easy to see, and this will be a much easier process. The second thing is that tracing time, you don't want to trace with a white line, especially if you have a white background. So that's what this trace layer is for. You set the layer to trace. Once you start tracing, look what happens. Big, fat, thick, heavy, easy to see line, right? That's awesome. Now, of course, I've got my line weight button turned on, so the heaviness of the line is displayed. But I can go around Superman here, and I can go clicky clicky. And of course, with my object snaps turned on, I'm going to try to be as exact as I can. And that was pretty quick, right? We went around the whole thing, piece of cake. Now, if things aren't exactly the way you want, you can always go in and adjust them. Okay, and all the tricks you've learned so far about joining lines and trimming lines and extending lines and breaking lines, well, all that stuff works too. So I'm going to just join these together into a single polyline. Because what I want to do next is I want to offset. I'll offset the polyline inward. Right? And with a couple of little tricks, it's easy to do that. Of course, my polar is on, so my horizontal lines are perfectly horizontal. My vertical lines will be perfectly vertical, etc., etc. And of course, if you got grips, you can go in, and if you have to, you can adjust the geometry until it's exactly how you need it. Okay? So there's my outside edge, and here's my inside edge. And last but not least, we got to look at the rest of the figure and figure out how to draw it. So part of it we'll probably be able to draw it with lines. So there's a straight line, and here's a straight line. So straight lines might have some use as we're doing this. It's kind of important to make sure you start and stop where you intend on. So don't stop short here or go too long. Stop right at the edge. You know, and if you need to connect to something and it's not connecting very well, maybe an example would be like, I'm going to try to draw an arc here, a 3-point arc. So from here to the midpoint here to here, you see I want it to connect to there, but it's snapping to there. There is a special snap called snap to nearest that basically lets you snap to anything. Ta-da! And now it's totally touching and perfectly attached. So I'd use that snap to nearest when you're trying to connect to things that are not an endpoint or a midpoint or a tangent or a quadrant. It'll make your life a little bit more bearable. Okay, get another arc, endpoint, midpoint, and again I don't have a point there, so I'll do the shift right click to get the nearest. And that looks pretty good. And of course with arcs, just like with lines, you have a bit of flexibility. You can go in and adjust them until they're exactly the way you want them. Alright, so on at least Superman here, the straight line tool is going to be very helpful as it makes straight line segments, and I'll be able to draw some of it with that. Other parts, I'm going to need the arc tool. Your design, you might need the circle tool. You might also want to play with the ellipse tool if you have ovals on your drawing or your design. Sometimes though we get these curves that are irregular curves, like this one. This is a non-circular irregular curve. So this requires a special tool, and that is something called a spline. And we did use it when we drew that map for the text assignment. So you have to drop down the draw panel, and you might want to pin it open so that it doesn't close up on you. And then we'll click on the fit spline. So endpoint. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just click every so often following the edge that we're using as our reference. And of course there's nothing to snap to here. We're not snapping, we're just approximating. Because that's the best you can do when you are working with a raster image. And where's the edge? Well, what's the edge? Is it the white? Is it the black? Or is it the grays in between that are all pixelated here? See, hard to tell, right? But with the spline, we can go in and we can get as close as we can. And then at some point, we can go in and make adjustments to it if we need to. So there's the end of my spline, and I'll hit enter. And that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. But every time you clicked, you left one of these control vertices. So you can go in, if you want to, and tweak. Okay, you can grab the grip, you can adjust the grip, you can go in there, and you can lengthen, shorten, move, adjust fine-tune your non-circular curves until they're exactly the way you want them. Okay, that's shaping up pretty nice. I'll go and I'll do the outside edge here, and again I'll start with the snap to nearest, from here to here to here, here to here, and every time I'm clicking I'm leaving a control point to go back to after. And I'll end on the nearest. That's not what I want. So I'll do a little trimming. I'll do a little relocating with that grip. And I got a little handle there to control it. That is not making me happy, so I'll go back in and I'll tweak it until I'm satisfied. Much better. I like that a lot better. Oh, down here, is that a spline or an arc? I'm going to say it's an arc, because it looks kind of archy to me. So we'll say start at nearest. Here's the midpoint, and then we'll end over here. End at nearest. Okay. And then the last little bit is a little squiggle down here at the bottom. Move from nearest. Bam, bam. Click, click, click. Can't click too much because every time you click, you're giving yourself a grip to go back to later on to do editing. It's probably easier to have one or two extra grips than to be wishing you had one or two more grips that aren't in there. Okay, then it kind of abruptly ends, so I'll hit enter. Right there. Maybe I'll start the next spline from this sharp corner here, because that's kind of how it looks to me. Click, click, click. Click, click. Click, click, and click. And then what I just did, of course you don't want to do, I just hit escape. Escape does not end the command. Escape undoes everything you just did, which is, you know, less than wonderful. So, to nearest, and then enter. There we go. Alright, so I'm really happy with that. I like how that looks. Okay, I'm pretty glad that the tracing went well. So, here's a couple of things we're going to do now. We are going to turn off the engraving layer. I'm sorry, we're going to turn off the raster layer. That's right, I don't want the raster image. All I care about is the vector lines. And I got vector lines. Okay, and then my second thing I need to do is I need to figure out, am I going to engrave, am I going to score, or am I going to cut? So these trace lines get you started, but these are not the end of the project. The end of the project will be when you determine, is this a cutting line? Is this an engraving line? Or is this a scored line? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the stuff that I drew on the inside here. I'm going to put it all on the engraving 0.4 layer. And now, to try to visualize this, think of it like this. I'm going to have a piece of wood or a piece of acrylic cut out in the shape of the Superman shield, because it's on the cut layer. And then within that, I'm going to have this border that follows that. And then within that, we have the S for Superman, right? It looks like I got a little tiny thing right there that I probably don't want. A little red spot. So we got rid of that. Alright. So, what else can we do here? What other options do we have? Once things are traced, we need to assign them to different layers. Well, how about hatch? Do you have a hatch pattern you want to include? Because you can do that. We could take a hatch pattern and we could use that to fill in an area. Sometimes AutoCAD has a problem with hatch patterns in that it doesn't stay inside the lines. If that's the case, we got ways of working around that. What if I did this? What if I did these as solid and the S with nothing? So the S will not be engraved, but all the white stuff here, when it gets printed out on the laser, will be engraved. Okay, so there's a possibility, right? And in fact, there are lots of possibilities. There are lots of possibilities. Let me make a copy of this, just so you can see what we have for options here. And the options are almost too many to mention. Almost. So as an example, I mean, we have our original here where we cut the shield shape out and everything is engraved. On this one, I just changed the hatch to a different hatch, different scale, and I've got some scoring lines on there. So these lines will be like a razor thin blue color. Well, blue color on AutoCAD, but razor thin engraving on the laser. Razor thin scoring. Okay, and I'll set all these edges up as scored lines. Other option is engrave the shapes and then use the scoring for things like hatch, because it'll be very light and it'll be very precise. That's a nice look. Here we've got cut this shape out and we've got fill in the S instead of fill in the shape around the S, right? Over here I've got, I don't want to cut out the Superman shield. I don't want to cut out that pentagon. I want to cut out a circle. And actually I want to cut another circle in it so I can hang it off of a string, or I can attach my keys to it. Right, and then what we have down here is we've got all the geometry that we want either engraved or that we want scored. On this one here, think about what we're going to get. We can put this on cut. So we'll cut out the shield, and it will engrave the inner edge of the shield, and then it will cut this part out, the S out. And then on this one, I'm going to make a sandwich. I'm going to cut out the shield, and I'm going to engrave these lightly, and then I'm going to cut out this part, and I'm going to stick it on top of there. And then what we're going to get something made with 2 layers. So just to give you an idea what that would be like, we'd look at something like this then, right? With 2 different layers of material, one on top of the other, making a sandwich or a layered construction. Cut out part on the top, and then just the shield shape on the bottom. Okay, so lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of options on what you want to do. If your logo has text, I don't suggest tracing text unless it's something really special